Somebody on a boat, a canal boat. That was interesting. Anyway, we are live. Good morning. Good
Morning.
morning. Good morning to everyone. Good morning if you're joining us on LinkedIn. Good morning if you are joining us on YouTube. I know one or two people have started joining on this new channel that I've got on YouTube. Good morning, Ruth.
Good morning, Cheryl. It's lovely to see you.
Likewise. Thank you so much for joining. And it sounds as though you've had a good week, but I tell you what, the weather's dipped this week, right? It's definitely winter or wintry, shall I say.
It really is. I've got a tree that has been thriving. It is thriving, but
Yeah.
literally it's like, okay, it's officially cold. I'm going to change colour now. Overnight, it's changed colour. It's really, definite shift.
Yeah.
Definite shift.
Absolutely. Good morning. If you're joining us live, please do say good morning in the chat. Maybe let us know how your week has been. We're going to be talking about the path to the boardroom. And I ummed and ahed about what to call this, and I consulted with ChatGPT as well for some ideas, as we were just talking about that off air. And we've got a bit of tradition on this LinkedIn Live, Ruth, where I get ChatGPT to write your introduction, and then you get to rate it out of 10. So when just before we came on, we were talking about ChatGPT. So let's see how it does with this. I'm delighted to be joined today by Ruth Mallors-Ray OBE, an experienced board director and non-executive director with over 25 years of experience driving innovation across government, industry and academia. Ruth has held senior leadership and advisory roles across aerospace, engineering and technology, helping organizations turn research and innovation into real commercial and societal impact. Her career includes leading national collaborations in aerospace and space, contributing to the creation of the UK's Aerospace Technology Institute and guiding innovation strategy at the highest levels of industry and government. She now serves on several boards and advisory panels where she continues to champion sustainability, diversity, and greater representation of women in STEM and leadership. How did ChatGPT do out of 10?
Well, it's absolutely fine, but if I was to say like my toes are curling due to me, what is it about? What is it about women particularly, or British women? I don't know, but you go, ooh.
Yeah, well, and we'll probably get into that. There is something about how we respond to those accolades, and even that small story that you were showing just before we joined. We are quite uncomfortable. And interesting you say with British women. I remember I don't know if you remember the app Clubhouse that it was during the pandemic. It was called Clubhouse. It was an audio only app. Good morning. I'm going to look at my phone, see if I can see who that is, because your name hasn't come through. So good morning. But this audio only app, anybody from all over in the world could join this app. And the one thing I noticed was the difference between women from the US when they, for example, joined a call or a room, as it was like, hi, my name, very confident, the elevator pitch was there with the introduction. And, as you say, certainly as British women, a lot more reserved and, not wanting to blow our own trumpets.
I think Brits as a norm, Brits, and then you layer in the whole female, I can't shout about myself and I can't apply for a job unless I can do every element of the criteria, that stuff, it is noticeable, but
it's almost part of the that was Jill that's joined. Good morning, Jill. It's almost part of the backdrop to this whole conversation. It's one of the elements, isn't it? How we respond to things like feedback and in particular praise and those confidence levels and what it can do, etc., in terms of derailing. Anyway, let's start at the beginning, because one of the things when we were talking off air earlier in the week, you were talking a little bit about your start on your career path, and the one thing that I scribbled down, even though I do have an AI note taker, but the one thing I did scribble down was you used a phrase which was that you chose to look up and not look down, and what that meant for you in terms of your outlook, in terms of your career in the future. So just tell us about that in terms of your start and that mindset about your career and how you went into things.
Yeah, so where I started, you know, I often say I'm a chemist by education, because that's where I started. You know, I did science, A-level, I then did a chemistry degree, and then I did a PhD, and I loved all of that, actually. And I loved my doctorate. I really loved that no exam type thing, that, you know, weird vocal pressure kind of thing. It's still a pressure I don't really respond well to. And I loved it. I really loved it. But when I looked around me and looked at people like my PhD supervisor and the joy that they had, I first started to think, I don't have that level of joy, of real, oh my gosh. And I also started to really look at or feel it wasn't for me. It didn't float my boat, so to speak, looking down into the test tube, the Schlenk tube, whatever it is. It didn't really mobilize me in that, you know, ferreting down and down and down. I started to think, actually, I just want to be looking up and forward. I want to be looking out more. So I like the networks, I like the contacts, I didn't really mind talking on every other term. We had to present to the entire department our research, which was painful, but I didn't mind that. But that was my first really big learning. You know, each job, I've had a lot of different jobs, different sectors. What I would say is each one has given me a little spark of something that I've learned from it. And in my PhD, even though I loved my days in Edinburgh, really still trip back to Edinburgh, all those things, I didn't like looking down. I wanted to look up.
Yeah.
And
it's really interesting, isn't it?
It's really interesting. Yeah, really interesting. And
yeah,
in quite a few moments like that, because the next job I had, I went into production chemistry. So I was still in the application. So I wasn't doing the science, I was applying it.
Yeah.
You talk about male-dominated environments. I was on helicopters going to offshore platforms. And so you're the only technical female at that time, this is the late 90s. You're the only female on a platform of 450, 500 people. Everyone knows your name. Within 30 seconds of being on the platform. Hi, Ruth. Hi, Ruth. Wherever you go, it's really disconcerting. But in that world, that was really about the application, but also the sales. And that's where I learned I'm not a sales girl. I'm an influencer, not TikTok. You won't find me on TikTok doing any sort of little dances or I'm not that kind of, I like influencing. I like getting people on board with an idea. So it's interesting, isn't it? That I suppose I'm just getting old as well. You start whimsically reflecting.
But I mean, really interestingly, and I'm just we've had another we've had a happy Halloween come in. I forgot it is indeed Halloween. Happy Halloween. I hope I'm actually looking out the window at some pumpkins, but across the road on a neighbour's wall. But what I sort of take from that story, there's something about how you had the insight about, you know, the things that you enjoyed, the things that you didn't enjoy. How do you think people create the space and or time to do that? You know, how do we get more clarity over those things that do spark, spark joy, or how do we learn to tune into those little signals about actually, you know, where we should maybe be taking our career? And I guess I ask that for people that are maybe earlier in their career, you know, 20s, 30s, or even 40s, but potentially maybe haven't tuned in to some of those messages. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
I guess really, I do know that I am a bit of a deep, you know, I tend to reflect quite a lot. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't really like New Year's Eve. I just feel like this is, oh my God, what did I do last year? You know, but so I'm always thinking about that kind of stuff. But one of the things I did have very early on as well was I was very open to feedback. I was very open to people who were saying, have you thought about this direction? I was very open to that. I was open to that in my PhD. I was, you know, my parents were always very good about what direction you're taking here. They didn't expect me to have a definitive answer, but they were like, where are you going, Ruth? And I think there's something about noticing that feedback and noticing that insight. And in things like performance reviews, I know there'll be HR people maybe listening in, and in performance reviews, if they're done really well, can be hugely insightful. And actually, Cheryl, it's when I was at EY, I know you were at EY as well, but I think I was there before you. I remember talking to a director there, and he talked about people, and he said, we do these reviews and then we go, oh, she's really great at networks and influence and leadership, blah, blah, blah. She's really rubbish at detail. Right, let's get her on a course about detail. He says, why do we do that when actually what that then does is create really average people versus let's really channel her strengths, but get her to understand that for you to fly, Ruth, you have to surround yourself by people who are really good at detail. And that was a big mentor thing, actually. This guy, David, said to me, surround yourself by the best people who are not mirror images of yourself. Surround yourself when you're in leadership and management positions. If you are not a detail person, make sure you've got someone on your team. If you are really terrible at managing time and deliverable schedules, make sure you've got someone on your team. And they are really uncomfortable people for me to work with, because they're like, we need to sit down and talk about the budget. Like, but you do have to do that. And so I think for me, those sparks of understanding came from being really open to the performance review process, and also that process of people saying, where are you going next?
It's really interesting. I mean, it sounds as though that director was definitely, possibly ahead of his time. I guess it probably links into what I guess is now called strengths-based, strengths-based talent management. I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but definitely focusing on, the strengths, and actually how do we push those forward and make the most of the strengths rather than focusing on the weaknesses.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really powerful. I'm play into that. We talk a lot, don't we, as women, about lean into those strengths, lean into that ability. So no, without a doubt he was. I've had a few people, I've worked with. I mean, one of my first mentors, when I look back, I mean, this was in oil and gas in the late 90s. One of my first mentors was a complete and utter feminist. He was just, how lucky was I?
Yeah. Well, and let's get on to mentors, because I know for you, and you are a mentor, and it's obviously had a massive impact in your career. And as you were talking there about, getting different parts of feedback, some of which may come from a line manager, or somebody else in the business, or a sponsor. And I know you also talk about coaching. We've got Junior Beeman on. He is also a coach, I want to say, within an exec coach within NatWest. So he leads a network and he's also an exec coach. So just talk a little bit about the importance of these types of roles, mentors, coaches and advisors, and, how important they are, but also where to find a good one and how to find a good one.
Yeah, and I do think they're important, actually. And I think whilst there is a sort of blurring in some aspects of coaching and mentoring, if we had to go to a black and white view, coaching is about performance, in my view, and mentoring is about experience sharing and bringing something to life. So sharing my experiences with others, or giving me that context. So some of my early mentors were really brilliant, because I was getting approached to go from the Aberdeen capability of this engineering firm to London. And, this guy, John, who was just amazing, still in touch with him, he said, I need to have a chat with you. And he shared with me the context of the politics of what was going on at the time. He shared the context of the guy who was coaching me, not coaching me, persuading me, to come to London. And I think the most amazing thing, really, when I look back as well, is that, the AMEC, the Aberdeen office, was really losing someone who was potentially a strong candidate for leadership in AMEC and female in a very male-dominated world. And they encouraged me to let me fly, and they didn't hold on to me. They didn't try to stop that. So that mentoring piece is about the individual, not the organisation, whereas the coaching part tends to be about the performance and the organisation. And, you know, I always, when I start a new relationship with a mentee, I always set out the ground rules of the confidentiality, what goes on in here stays in here, so you can say anything. And okay, most of my mentees now are, you know, completely external to my life, you know, but when I was mentored internally, and particularly in AMEC in those early days, or even in Sainsbury's, I had to feel safe. And that was really important, that what went on in that conversation was never used in performance management, you know, career progression. It was purely safe. I think that's quite an important part of mentoring.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, I feel like I've benefited enormously for it. I think it's fair and just that I give back.
Absolutely.
Lift someone up.
Yeah, absolutely. What's a good way of finding or identifying a mentor? How did it happen for you? Was it almost just, and you may or may not even have used those terms. So was it just like a natural progression? You know, how did these relationships come about?
Some of it was. I mean, John was a bit of both. So John was also kind of assigned to me because I was on a development program in AMEC, and you had to have a mentor, but he was already kind of in that space. And then, but I think the big thing is to ask. I think there is something about in your performance reviews, in your line management reviews, going, you know, I'd really value a mentor in the organisation, you know, who can bounce things around with me and I can bounce around things with them. So I'm not, you know, you can even butter it up. So I'm not bothering you with these things, but, you know, once a month I can, or once a quarter, I can go and have a couple of hours with somebody. So I think, and I will talk about this later as well, actually, when we come on to how to get onto boards, you have to ask, right? You have to say, I'd really like a bit of extra support. I'd really like a mentor in this massive organisation. One, do we have a programme to help me find someone? And if we don't, could we find someone? Is it feasible that I could have a mentor? And I do think you have to ask. In aerospace, actually, where I sit more of my time now, aerospace and aviation, the industry's created a female mentoring platform called Alta Mentoring, and you can, as a mentor, you register what you can mentor in, and as a mentee, you can just go in and you can look for leadership or technical or teaming or meeting, I don't know what it is, but you can say, I'm looking for someone who can help me with, and then they reach out to you, and it's fantastic. It's completely fantastic. It's giving a lot of women access to people in a very safe way online. You know, there's no way I'm mentoring somebody at the moment. There's no way on earth she'd have approached me in her company if I was in her company.
Yeah.
The dynamic is, there's just no way she'd have done it.
Yeah. So it's really, it's kind of like level things, and it's made it easier to get access. Yeah.
Yeah, we're a lot braver online, are we not?
Yeah. For good or for bad.
Good or bad, but we're a lot braver online.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to talk a little bit about women in STEM, and also, and not necessarily, you know, because obviously I know that you've got this STEM experience, but also just we're going to get into the things that either enable or block women from getting into the boardroom, and perhaps timely that Lisa Ardley Price has joined as well. Good morning, Lisa. Lisa looks after I always get these titles wrong, so apologies for my NatWest employment leads. Lisa looks after the global gender network for NatWest, which is some 9,000 members globally. Some of these gender networks are huge.
Oh, Lisa, more. That's amazing.
Yeah. And she also does like a million other things. She's also a yoga teacher, managing legal counsel, now sits on a few boards. I don't know how she does it all. Junior has said it. ERGs are great for creating mentoring programs. Very true, actually. Love Lisa's on women and ours on reciprocal mentoring. I recently wrote about this. That's a good point, Junior, in terms of, and I don't know whether this is something you've seen, Ruth, but in I guess, you know, as we can see in NatWest, because Junior chairs the global multicultural network, they as networks have created mentoring programs, again, I guess, to make that access easy into senior individuals. Yeah.
The other thing I would just touch on very slightly, I know we're going to talk about women and STEM, but I've also been reverse mentored, and I think that's going to become more important. I was reverse mentored when I was in my mid-40s by a young guy called Elliot, who I'm also still in touch with. Elliot was 28. He was just come out of, he was an associate law trainee, solicitory person. Totally different guy. Totally and utterly different guy. Different technology, different capability, ethnicity, everything. Everything about Elliot was different. And it was illuminating.
Yeah.
Me being mentored. So he was being held back because he was so technologically savvy. This is like 15, 20, 10 years ago. He was, you know, really efficient on his time, and people would say, here, get Elliot to do it. He's really quick. And because of that, he was starting to say, dumbing himself down technology. And I think we're going to see more and more people now coming in with great technology skills, but actually, are they going to have the social skills? Are they going to have that connection? And so that reverse mentoring, I think, is going to become really, really important.
Absolutely.
It was a hoot. It was an absolute hoot. I can't tell you. It was such fun. Really super guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love, you know, you said that you're still in touch. You said that you're in touch with a number of your, for which I love. Like, I love that. I think sometimes when we move organizations, you know, we kind of just cut these ties, and we need to keep these bridges going. What you've described in terms of reverse mentoring is what I believe Junior is referring to in reciprocal mentoring. I think some organizations use that term. Yeah. And then Lisa has said here, and there's a point here that I wanted to pick up on, because it links back to something you said about one of your mentors. So Lisa said, we've got some amazing mentoring programs, and then they evolve into sponsorship. And something you said, Ruth, because you said that with one of your mentors, they shared with you the politics of that organization. And I thought that's the kind of thing that a sponsor would help you with as well, you know, in terms of who are the important people to speak to, and maybe opening some of those doors for you as well.
And gave me a real insight on the dynamic. You know, there was another instance as well, actually, when, you know, I first came into aerospace, and there was a big sort of shuffle going on with some of the big OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers and tier ones. And the guy who'd recruited me, who at the time was the chief exec of the trade association, said, Ruth, I need to talk to you. Come to my office. So I trot. He says, you're going to start seeing some really odd behaviour, and because you're not in the industry, you won't know what's going on in these rooms, right? You just won't get it, and you'll go, well, that's really weird behaviour. And so he laid out what was going on with, you know, a site being sold and somebody else buying it, and because they were buying it and there wasn't enough money, government were intervening, and all this sort of stuff. It was all done openly, but not, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I really remember that, because then I'd be in these rooms and go, God, that's really odd behaviour. But now I know why. He didn't want me to trip up. He didn't want me going in trying to sort something out that wasn't sortable. He didn't want me looking foolish, because I hadn't got the context of the industry. I'd only been in play about 6 weeks. You know, I didn't have the culture. I didn't have the dynamic of aerospace. And so he said, I've got to make sure she doesn't, you know, trip herself up here. Yeah. So really important, really important.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And then let's talk about, you know, obviously you talk about you're now in aerospace, but yes, STEM. Obviously, you started your career as a scientist. Why do you think it is that that the participation rates for girls is still so low in STEM and in STEM careers? And you talk about being, you know, one of several hundred on a rig kind of thing. What's the issue here?
There's lots of reasons for it. There's lots of reasons, you know, there's lots of reasons about, you know, women do exit companies for periods of time to have children, then come in and out. And that stalls them, not just in STEM, but it stalls them in financial services, it stalls them in professional services, it stalls them. And I'm not saying that women that shouldn't be ignored. You know, it just is a fact, right? It's a fact. But for me, there's something about school and primary school and high school. And, you know, I've talked a lot about this to other people, that if at A level you are getting 50% of your students choosing science, then you haven't got a cat in hell's chance of getting 50% of that 50% choosing science and engineering to go to uni, and then you haven't got another batch coming out. So it's something about what goes on still in schools around science and engineering. Engineering isn't taught as engineering. I think it should be. Engineering becomes a discipline at degree level and apprenticeship level, and so and teachers do a job that I actually consciously chose to never go near. I really own that, my idea of hell. However, what I would say is I don't think teachers have got a broad enough understanding of careers. They are still in a space that you do something for life because they have, and so I think there's something about that, the volume, and then we have to sort of say, why isn't the volume coming through? And there's loads of research that shows that in mixed schools, girls do worse than they do in a single discipline. And a lot of that research is because I want to look attractive to boys. I don't want to look like a brainiac. I don't want to look smart. So there's a bit around that. I think there's something huge around the agenda of schools are moving people from C to B, whatever the numbers are now. I think it's 7 to 6 to 8, whatever it is. So I still talk about O levels for crying out loud. So, but there's something about that pressure. Science is hard. So if you've got students who might get to B's but not A's, but they're going to get A's in geography, I just think there's an unconscious influence. I know parents are nervous about science because they want their kids to get 11 A stars or whatever it is. And so I think there's a whole stack of things that layer on. And then I think the social media, I live in Kent, there's a couple of high schools really nearby. Girls all look the same now. The social media angle of, they're slim, they've got long straight hair, they've got their double plaits, social media is all about all that, and science is still perceived as geeky. And so it's not one thing, it's multiple things. Just multiple things. And then you go to, actually, there is a reality when you look up where are the women. I really don't like being called a role model. I accept that I am. I accept that a role model means you are somebody goes, so you can get to the top of a tree, you can do this as a scientist. But I think there's something about that. Do you know what I mean? We have to be more visible. There was quite a big campaign a few years ago of like a database that you could register, so that like Today programme and things like that, if they were looking for experts, this database was women voices only.
Right.
If you listen to the radio, they go to their who they know, what they know. It's like, I'll phone Bob, I'll phone Bill, rather than actually I'm going to give Ruth Mallors-Ray a call, I'll get her online.
Yeah, absolutely. The importance of role or individuals that we can see, whether or not they're called role models, but these visible people that we say, well, actually, Ruth did it, or, I see that person that, they can do it. Because as you were talking there, especially about the school bit, it made me think about my sister, who is incredibly creative, likes making things. And I thought to myself, and she's really handy in terms of like DIY and, but also very artistic, but really understands 3D shapes. That's the only way I can describe it. I thought, she could have been an engineer. She's actually really smart academically as well. She could have been an engineer, when I think the pieces through. But you're right. I don't think the schools think like that.
No, and there is quite a drive actually in schools now around STEAM over STEM. Right. And the A is the arts, because I am hugely creative. The reason there's a screen behind me is because behind that are my sewing machines, so I'm hugely creative. I've decided this year I'm painting my own Christmas cards. They're a bit clunky, but I'm hugely creative. But I'm also very evidence-based and very, why is that happening? I'm very sciencey. We're vastly creative people in how we think, engineers.
That's so interesting. And I think there's also a lesson in there, isn't there, for those of us that are now through our school days, but still when we're looking at our careers and our career paths, let's not be limited by, those kind of old, like, bags of stereotypes that we brought with us,
Exactly. And it's the dialogue, the last couple of times I've done schools, teachers saying, you've got to listen to this woman, you're going to decide what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And the first thing I sort of say gently, without overtly criticising the teacher in front of all their students, is, well, actually, I've wandered around. And, for me, the advice I always give to students, if they're ever, wanting to talk about it, is, do you really like maths? Yes. Are you reasonably good at it? Yeah, do it then. Don't worry at this stage about what you're going to do with it. Don't worry. If you like it, study it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Rather than trying to think, what have I got to do? We're still in that space. Jobs are so different now.
Yeah.
Careers are so different.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved maths, but also, as you said, I went to a girls' school and I took physics, and I loved maths and all of that. So, for those parents that are listening, if you do have a good girls' school around you and you've got girls, please do consider it as an option.
Yeah.
Jill has put this comment. I don't know whether this is something you've heard of. I haven't, Ruth. So I might have to ask Jill to either give us an explanation or drop a link in the comments, please, Jill. Hope this isn't a widespread phenomenon, but there's some research on the reverse Matilda effect, which is quite depressing. Jill, we don't know what the reverse Matilda effect is. Please explain.
Matilda was quite naughty, wasn't she?
Yeah. So does that mean that girls are now becoming that? Maybe girls are like learning to speak up for themselves, and maybe the pendulum's swinging too far. I don't know. Let's go on to getting into senior roles and some of the things that help and hinder women when it comes to progressing in their careers, particularly in terms of heading towards the boardroom. So, one of the things that I asked you, whether you'd sort of seen this and whether you agreed with the research, was this research around the fact that often women tend to step away as though it's a choice, but often women are either moved into roles or they take on roles that aren't operational or technical or P&L, so don't have P&L responsibility. Is that something you have seen? And do you think that the research is correct in terms of and it's probably not only women actually, for individuals to have a better chance of, if we talk about the sort of top roles on the exec table, that you have to stay in those kind of core operational and P&L roles?
Yeah, so I think it is really interesting, and so my answer is going to be a bit muddled. So I think women in organisations are often, and I've had this feedback. We're good at just getting something done, right? So you're then in a meeting and someone will say, what about, organising this? And someone will say, oh, Ruth's already done it, it's on. Or I'll say, I've done it, it's on. So I think we're really good at doing things and just making things happen. So for years, people would say, you need to have Ruth in the room because she gets things done. I was like, I don't know what to do. I get other people to get things done, right? So I get things done. So there's something about women owning and being more visible about, I have sorted that, I've done that, I've made that happen, and we don't do that, right? So it's that whole, joke about multitasking, or, the fact that, so women, I think, do that and then don't own it. There is something as well about how we talked about this earlier in the week, that there's some sort interesting about how you get promoted in the harder skilled roles, and I don't mean harder as in difficult, I mean that concept of hard and soft skills. And I think in hard skill disciplines, really what you would class as like, where you've got to do accountancy exams or engineering exams or law exams or, financial exams and discipline orientated. I believe that you are broadly promoted on being very good at those skills, and you end up, and of course we're talking hugely generically, right? We have to do that because it's how you do it. But you end up with people at the top of the tree who may be the most amazing accountant as a chief financial officer with no people skills whatsoever. And so if we started to look at promoting in the balance of not just what you do, but also how you do it, as in they've built networks, they've collaborated, they brought HR in at the right time, whatever it is, would that see a shift of how women are promoted because of that? How? So I think there's definitely something in that. And then the other thing that we did talk about, which I'll mention, is that it was a professional services firm talk he was talking to me about, and they did this big thing about perceptions and biases. And it was a promotion meeting of ready now, ready in 3, ready in 5+. And you all had your team and you had your little dots and you had to put them in these 3 barriers. And then they said, right, now they're all little black dots. I want you to go put a blue or a pink dot on it as to the gender of those dots. And broadly speaking, all little blue dots in the bottom left of ready now. Broadly speaking, lots of pink dots in the 5 years. And then they flipped the argument again of who are the ones with all the best revenue targets delivered, sales increases. And broadly speaking, it was in the women, and broadly speaking, it wasn't in the boys. And so this bias of, oh, he's a really good guy and blah, 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 that whether it's bluster, whether it's I can have a beer on a Friday night, not that we do that anymore, but that kind of thing. But that bias of women at the top were the best sales, the best thing. Now, why is it that they don't know that they are? Yeah. So there's some, and I don't know, so that's kind of almost like a contra argument to what I was saying earlier as well. But there's still this like bias. So yesterday I was on a board meeting and we're doing an internal interview for somebody, and I go, why is it that we've got 3 white men interviewing an Asian woman? Oh God, have we? Oh, we're normally really good at this stuff. Like, well, it's not good enough. Yeah. There's a consciousness of these things. You know, I was cross.
Yeah. Yeah. And that process that you described as a way of like disrupting bias, I absolutely love it. Yeah. Absolutely love it.
I really loved it. And, you know, we all have them. We all have them. We all do. And if we don't think we do, right? If, you know, yeah. I'm from the north, people have got a bias against me. They've got a perception of me. You know, oh, people say this to me out loud. Oh, don't Ruth, she's from the north. She's really blunt. You know, it's all the time. It's just like, don't mind Ruth, she's from the north. And it's the biases. And you know, I've got a personality where I go, you're absolutely right, I'm from up north. Now, you go sit back and I'll go do this. So I use it, right? And I absolutely use, and I've used it persistently. So it's my personality. It's how I've managed to leverage that. I use humour a lot in work, a vast amount. I think it's a very powerful tool. Uncover biases when people say there aren't any are really powerful. Really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Tools to disrupt the bias. And then, you know, the other thing that you said about that process where, you know, you were then putting the dots, or the leaders would then put the dots on whether, you know, the men or the women had, how they had performed against their targets, you know, the KPIs, and the fact that a lot of the women would have performed really well, but maybe wouldn't have even realized. And I guess it's that thing, isn't it? You use the term bluster. So it's that overconfidence versus, I'm going to use the term underconfidence, but it's almost just like, not knowing, not being so aware of, you know, your performance.
Over the years, I've been told that I lack confidence, right? So I now start, if I do I spoke at a mentoring event the other week. I've done it a few times now. So I've now taken to introduce myself as, my name is Ruth Mallors-Ray, and I am a strong and successful, fabulous woman. Just for the avoidance of doubt, I know exactly who I am. And, you know, the first time I did it, I got a round of applause. And it's, you know, this confidence thing. Interestingly, when I was being interviewed for the process of being interviewed for the director of this aerospace and defence knowledge transfer programme, I had no knowledge of aerospace and defence, but I did know how to build networks and communities. And we talked a lot I was being coached in parallel at the time. We talked a lot about how to answer the question of, you've got no sector knowledge, you don't know anything about aerospace and defence. How are you going to talk to senior individuals with 25 and 30 years of experience? And we talked around how to not go defensive, because the interview panel, which was 2 men, then the second round was 4 men, and then the second round was 2 men. This is in 2008, all white, right? Right. All they would hear was, I can't. So we trained me, and this is something I mentor a lot on now, is how to answer a question positively without fibbing or blustering. So you're right, I haven't got that experience. However, this role is really about the networking. This role is really about building purpose around community. And I can do that. And I did it here, did it here. And I had no experience in retail, had no experience in professional services. So we created a framework that I could answer a question constructively and sound like a boy, as in I know how. Yeah. And the other bit of research that many of the people, or you may well have heard of, Ashridge Business School did a lot of research on this in the early 2000s. A job article has 5 criteria. If a man can see they can do 1, they'll apply. If a woman can't do 4 or more out of 5, they won't apply. Yeah. They have to have 4 a minimum, if not all 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not that's not confidence of men. Yeah. That's booster. There's a difference. It's not confidence. Yeah. It's booster.
Yeah. And even I always sort of say, even as women, just reminding ourselves of those. It's a bias disruptor, isn't it? We internalize those biases against ourselves as women. So actually being aware of those elements of science and how they trip us, how we almost like sabotage ourselves, if that makes sense. And actually thinking, I mean, I love what you said there in terms of that different way of phrasing, where, for example, if you haven't got experience, there was something that you mentioned actually when we were talking in the week. You said something about a sentence to use in a board meeting. So, please do share that. And then we'll go into the comments.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So one of my mentees is the only female in a room. She's in a room full of very technical engineering types. She is a technical background, but her job in this role is program coordination, program management. So she's kind of got them to stop. She's got to get them stop talking about this content and start talking about the schedule and the program and the issues and stuff, rather than trying to fix it there in the room. I do love engineers trying to fix it in the room. But she's lacking that kind of, what she needs is a way of knowing what to say ahead of the meeting almost. And so we've been working on phrases and sentences that she can use that gets her voice into the room and cuts across things. And, I know that this is a really important topic, and I know it's a really interesting topic for you. We are now going to talk about the schedule, right? I've captured all the actions on how you're going to try and address that challenge, but I now need to talk about the schedule. And we've been working on sentences that she can just use to sort of give her the confidence, if that makes sense. Whenever over the years, I don't do so many of them now, but whenever I did keynotes, I would always know my first 2 sentences verbatim, and then I would just get going. And that's what I'm giving her, is know your sentence verbatim in that, because she's got to interrupt them. She's got to cut through. So we've been given the sentences. It's really interesting. It's worked really, really well for her as well. Really well.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that, and even when you said about, learning your first 2 sentences of your keynote, because I think sometimes we think that, you just must be able to just come up with these things off the top of your head. But actually, particularly if there is a confidence, challenge, or, because of the environment, it's not the most friendly of environments. You've got to get comfortable with these phrases and the things that you're going to say that are going to cut through, and literally practice them. And it's something interesting. I tell a little story. I remember a CIO, I think actually when they were just called IT directors back in the day. And I remember seeing him pacing around his room one day. And I asked him, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm presenting in the board later. I'm just going over what I'm going to say. And I thought it was a real revelation. I was like, like senior people do this. Like they actually practice what they're going to say. Yeah. Really important.
Yeah, definitely. So it's another tip that people say to me about, as a woman, I want to be heard in the room, and I'm going to a meeting and I don't know anybody. And the other thing I often say is, well, I think you need to know what you're going to say and when you're going to say it before you're in the room. So if you look at the agenda and you go, that's the agenda, that's the most important part for me, the issue I've got, or the challenge or the opportunity is this, that's when I'm going to speak. So you don't worry, you're not sitting there going, I've got to say something. You know what, and you know when, and you know when it's going to come up.
Oh, I love that.
It's worked magic for me over the years. When, can you believe it? I wouldn't actually speak up, but but it's really powerful.
Oh,
really powerful.
I love that. Knowing what you're going to say and when you're going to say it, amazing. Okay, I'm going to just dive back into the comments, and there's one question that I'm going to pick up on before we then wrap up with our final question. So the reverse Matilda effect, a gender bias where highlighting women's contributions to a field makes some people view that field as less valuable or attractive. Jill, I think you've explained this to me before. Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it?
What a load of nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like that breaks your heart, doesn't it? You know, I just can't.
Yeah.
2025 and we're still talking about, you know.
Yeah.
But thank you for the explanation. It's really, really helpful.
Yeah. Let's talk about representative panels briefly. So that example that you gave. Yeah. And so tokenistic. So example, having one woman on a panel of men can backfire. And it's not even just the panel, it's also the shortlist as well. Who was I talking to? Or I've heard something very recently. It was I'm going to say, I'm going to probably get the name wrong, but I'm going to say I think it's Vivian Arts that looks after the FTSE Women on Boards review, was talking about if the shortlist has only one woman, she's got no chance, basically. Words to that effect, you know. So I think to your point, I don't know who's left that comment, but yes, I think both the panel in terms of a broader representation, but also the shortlist. Otherwise, the chances based on the research mean that it's actually quite slim.
So I was on a board and we were recruiting a couple of extra non-execs, and the shortlist came back from the headhunter and there wasn't a woman on it. And the 3 women on this board went, well, why are there no women on this list? And she says, oh, well, we talked to quite a few and they're just not, you know, since the pandemic, they're this, they're that, blah, blah, blah. And so we 3 women gave them 15 women's names. And, you know, we can't find women, we can't this, we can't that. And I just thought, you know, my own view is I think you're being lazy. And I now I don't completely black and white, but I only give out women's names. Women know women. If you want women on your shortlist, ask women. If you want women on your panel or more women on your panel, ask women. Ruth, who should speak at my conference on? And I will give you women's names. Women always know women.
Yeah, absolutely. I love, and this final comment here, I love Thomas Chamorro Premnichik's take. So I'll probably butcher that name. Everyone is overconfident, but on average, men are more overconfident than women. So it is men who need to change, not women. I love that. I'm guessing that that's also Jill. Thank you for that, Jill. We're going to wrap up because we've gone way over as always. So the one thing that I asked you to leave us with, Ruth, today is one tip for women listening and one tip for the for our HR professionals that are listening as well. I mean, you've given some amazing insights, particularly around things like, I love the disrupting the bias of the you know, of these promotion conversations, which often are so opaque, you know, held behind closed doors, often not even discussed with the individuals. But one tip for some of the women listening and one for the HR professionals, really.
So I think the big thing for women for me is that point I made earlier about, and I wrote it down, was if you're going into a room, know what you're going to say and when you're going to say it, right? So that you just become known for being specific, you know, you're known for, you know, really being focused, but know what you're going to say and when you're going to say it. I think that's a really, you know, powerful way of being heard in meetings. And then the other one is, I think for HR, is to really consider this move to performance reviews, which are based on what and how. And on the how, this whole collaboration, communication, networking. And where I've seen it work really, really well is that I was given crib sheets So really great networking looked like this and really poor networking looked like this. Because the moment you start talking about behaviours, it becomes very emotional. So if you can talk about the how of the behaviours, but then give people good and great or great and poor examples, it helped me enormously when I had people working with me who weren't great, but the conversation became constructive because I had crib sheets. But I'd really love to see a bigger move towards the performance and the how, and that the how has got weight in the promotion process.
Absolutely amazing. And for those that are listening, I know we've got some employee network leads. I know we've got some DI leads as well. Share this with with your HR leads, and or try to influence into those processes. Knowledge is power. So I always think if you can find out what is happening in those whatever they're called, promotion conversations, calibration, all of that performance evaluation, it's all of the stuff that happens in a black box that nobody sees, right? Any opportunity to influence that with good objective evidence that disrupts the bias, I'm sure will be greatly appreciated. Ruth, thank you so much for this conversation. I feel like we could have gone on for much longer, but we taking your advice on board. I'm trying to be specific and concise.
Well, it's been a joy. What a lovely way to start a Friday.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, and thank you to everybody that that stayed with us, especially Jill. I think you've been with us the whole conversation, so thank you to everybody that's stayed with us for the live. And also, if you're watching this on the replay, thank you for taking some 51 minutes and 20 seconds out of your day to check this out. And if you do want to get in touch with Ruth, please do so. Because Ruth, do you work with corporates as well? Do you go in and do you work with
much? No, I'm definitely, and my consulting is in advisory of innovation. I'm not a HR.
Yes.
It's just my experiences, of being involved when I led teams. But I'm definitely abroad, and I'm about to go work with a big corporate, but it's in an innovation space.
And I know the thing is
artificial intelligence and digital technologies and God knows what.
And I know Ruth, I know you're sort of almost like a reluctant role model, but the one thing I would say to anybody that's listening to this, if you are looking for speakers to talk about progression and with practical tips, because as I was saying to Ruth earlier in the week, I sit on some panels, or sometimes I go to events, and sometimes the advice isn't coming from a place of experience and expertise, and I think, Ruth, that's definitely something that you bring. So if you do need somebody to bring real practical guidance, because I feel that we've had a lot of that this morning, then please do reach out to Ruth. You're on LinkedIn. I'm guessing you're not on TikTok and Instagram. No, likewise. No,
not on TikTok. I came off Twitter, and I'm on Facebook, but that's all about sewing and cooking. So I'm definitely on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So
Perfect. Okay, we're going to call it a day. Ruth, thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely incredible. And to everybody that's watching, have a great weekend. All right, take care.
Thanks, Cheryl.